You're listening to Spookbox, the only horror movie podcast where illusions affect reality. This week, the focus of the conversation is Perfect Blue, the 1997 anime psychological thriller written and directed by the late Satoshi Kon, the master of blending dreams and reality. I'm joined this week, as always, by Daf.
Hi, how's it going, guys?
And Heather.
Moshi moshi.
Before we get into the meat of the discussion, let's start with some general observations. Heather, was this your first time seeing the movie, and what was your gut reaction this time around?
Nah, it wasn't. I saw it when I was a teenager, and I didn't really get what was going on. I didn't get the film, so I kind of forgot the ending. And then when I saw it this time, it was just really satisfying to actually understand it on some level.
Nice.
So, I always liked it, always thought it was visually stunning, and I'm really excited that we're diving back in.
But this time you actually got it. Which is
like
always
the third part of the film where it becomes increasingly like
you had
dream
okay.
escapey. I could follow a thread of it this time.
Gotcha.
Not
okay.
a pleb anymore.
Dav, first time seeing it?
First time seeing it, loved it. Really loved it.
Nice.
I realised that you know what? These kinds of films really speak to me because one of the first things that it reminded me of watching it was Lost Highway, which came out in the same year, a David Lynch movie, which deals with a lot of similar sort of themes of sort of multiple personalities and dreams versus reality, and one bleeding into the other. So yeah, it spoke to me on a level. On that level.
You also saw Paprika recently.
I also saw Paprika. Yeah, I saw Paprika a few days ago and found Perfect Blue to be a much tighter film experience. I mean, I admired Paprika for being as outlandish as it was, but Perfect Blue seemed much more contained.
Yeah, it tells its story. I mean, one thing that really surprised me, Perfect Blue is only 80 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's an hour and 20. I had no idea. I remember seeing the film. I saw it the first time when I was 12.
Was it a DVD?
Damn right it was a DVD.
A lot of people seem to see it at that age. It seemed like maybe there was sort of a DVD release that had just come out or something. I've read online a lot of people saw it when they were roughly 12 years old. Maybe they're in their 30s now or late 20s.
So that would have been in the year 2000, like the year after it came out.
I saw it because my friend Carlton Clements,
shout out,
big shout out to Big Carlton. He had got the film from his mum, who thought, well, it's a cartoon, how bad can it be? But now, in fairness, like, I remember not being scared of the movie. I didn't
because you couldn't understand it.
Didn't have a baldy what was going on. So I had to watch it a couple of times more. Watched it again, doing a Japanese film course when I was an undergraduate. And I was like, oh yeah, Dragon Ball Z is maybe not as good as this. But yeah. Okay, so before we jump into the main talking points, I want to give a quick overview of the film for anyone who maybe hasn't seen it. Or maybe I'm giving this overview for us both, for us all, so that we can actually agree on what the hell happens.
That might be necessary.
That would be good, yeah.
So as with all our episodes, the summary is going to come with a huge spoiler warning. And as with our episode on Dark Encounter, I want to give a quick heads up and just to say the subject of the film deals with psychological trauma, disassociation, possible multiple personality disorders, and sexual assault. So look, if any of that makes you uncomfortable, maybe check out one of our other episodes. I recommend the episode on Butt Boy. What's your favorite? What are we recommending? What's your favorite episode we've done so far?
I think Butt Boy is my favorite so far.
It was a crazy episode.
If only I got to say it, because I got to say anus so many times.
I like Dark Encounter because, like, I think we actually managed to read more into a film than was there. Nice. And that's always fun. Nice.
Okay, so Perfect Blue tells the story of a transitional period in the life of Mima Kiryoge, played by Junko Iwao. Wow, my Japanese is terrible.
A for effort.
The young lead singer of fledgling pop idol group Cham. now attempting to transition towards a career as an actress under the advice of her management. The film opens with Mima's last performance with the group, a somewhat depressing affair on a small daytime outdoor stage where an audience composed almost entirely of adult men watch the group with cold attention. Just as Mima attempts to announce her retirement from the group, a scuffle breaks out between some hecklers and a devoted fan. The devotee, notable for his pronounced physical deformity, is attacked by the hecklers but refuses to give in, causing the hecklers to abandon their games and leave the concert. However, Mima nonetheless announces her retirement from the group. More accurately, one of the other girls does it for her, telling the crowd that Mima will be graduating from Cham to pursue other things. Leaving the gig, apologising and thanking her fans, Mima receives some fan mail telling her about the website Mima's Room, which may or may not be connected to a mysterious fax. Remember fax machines?
Oh, I remember fax machines.
Fax machines, crazy. To a mysterious fax she receives later that night, calling her a traitor. Jumping forward, we discover that Mima is set to have a bit part on the straight-to-video drama Double Bind, a slightly cheesy psychological Japanese thriller. Get it? Get it? About a young woman suppressing a past trauma through multiple personality disorder. It's meta. It gets meta from pretty much the get-go.
I'd say this is pretty meta.
Pretty meta. Mm-hmm. On the set, her managers, Tadakoro, a slightly sleazy but well-intentioned businessman, and Rumi, a former pop idol in her own right, discuss Mima's transition to acting and the need to change her image from one of being clean-cut to something more edgy and adult. Tadakoro subtly discusses Mima's lack of lines with the writer and director of the drama and seems to make some headway. Mima has made a good impression with the show's staff and has even received some fan mail which Tadakoro opens. The mail turns out to have been a letter bomb that injures Tadakoro and puts a halt to that day's filming. Mima goes home and, using the computer that her co-manager Rumi helped her set up earlier, accesses the website Mima's Room, a fan site dedicated to her. Although initially amused by the site's attention to detail, such as knowing what foot she begins dances with, Mima is quickly troubled by the invasive quality of the information. The writer of the site seems to know every detail about her, down to the brand of milk she buys, and makes assumptions about Mima's emotions. She's troubled by the website, which she fears may be a true insight into her own mentality. As the filming of Double Bind progresses, Mima is offered increasing coverage on the show in exchange for more edgy decisions in her public persona. Although she's given a bigger part, this is only offered in exchange for Mima performing in a rape scene or by having a photo taken by infamous glamour photographers. These decisions put an obvious strain on Mima, and she begins to see visions of her former Cham self reprimanding her for her career decisions. Equally troubled by the decisions is Rumi, who fears that this direction in career progression is hurting Mima's own psychological state. At the same time, the writing on Mima's Room becomes more venomously critical of Mima's career. And at the same time, both the writer of Mima's rape scene on Double Bind and the glamour photographer behind Mima's sexy photo shoot are murdered in mysterious circumstances. Now, under immense psychological strain from all of this and troubled by the invasive writings on Mima's Room that speak of an imposter, Mima begins to find it difficult to discern whether she's awake or dreaming, whether she is real or an imposter. When Mima's fish, one of the only sources of small happiness and regularity in her life, die for no apparent reason, she falls into floods of tears and is haunted by the spectre of her Cham self telling her that this is the result of her becoming tarnished. Her behaviour becomes increasingly erratic as she leaps from moving vehicles, chasing visions of her former self, and even breaks a china teacup in her hands just for the sensation of real blood. Her suspicions are mirrored by the events of Double Bind, in which her character suffers the sublimation of past trauma through split personality disorder. Scenes in the film begin to bleed into one another, with actions and dialogue flowing between scenes, leaving the viewer unsure of which story they're following, that of Double Bind or Mima's real life. Events come to a head on the final day of shooting on Double Bind. Once a wrap is called on the shoot, Mima is attacked by the fan from the beginning of the film. The physically deformed and off-puttingly high-pitched in voice. You know, he had that weird, like, squeaky voice.
Yeah, the kind of voice of someone who doesn't speak very much, perhaps.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great...
Something like that.
Me Mania, a devoted fan and avid contributor to Mima's room. Convinced that Mima is an imposter and that he is in cahoots with the real Mima, with whom he exchanges daily emails, Me Mania attempts to rape Mima. However, she's able to hit him in the temple with a hammer, either knocking him unconscious or killing him. Me Mania's fate is unclear because Mima's psychological state falls further into disarray. She can no longer discern if she has just fought off a rapist or if she's still on the set of Double Bind. Luckily, Rumi comes to her rescue. Ushering her into her car, Rumi announces that she's going to take her back to Mima's room. Scary, right? Yeah?
Spookbox.
Waking up, Mima finds herself in her bedroom, with every detail in its right place. Every stuffed animal, every poster, and even her fish tank. Her fish having seemingly miraculously come back to life. At this, Mima realises that she isn't in her own room, but has instead been taken to the home of her stalker, Rumi. Suffering from an advanced form of multiple personality disorder, Rumi has taken on the appearance of Mima's Cham idol persona down to the unceasing smile. Reasoning that there can only be one true Mima, she reveals that she convinced Me Mania to rape Mima and has been committing the murders in an attempt to correct the course of Mima's career. Chasing Mima through the streets of Tokyo with an ice pick, in an absolutely gorgeous sequence that blends Mima's fractured psychological state with glimpses into reality, Mima and Rumi continue to struggle against one another. Rumi's wig eventually comes loose due to the fight, triggering a psychological relapse. Crawling over broken glass to retrieve the wig, Rumi injures herself and wanders into the middle of a busy road. Embracing the glare of oncoming headlights like the lights of a stage, Rumi gives herself up to death, only to be saved at the last minute by Mima. Years later, the successful Mima visits Rumi in a mental institution where she seems to be in a semi-permanent fugue state, convinced that she is the true Mima. However, in the film's final moments, Mima Kiryoge looks into the rearview mirror of her car and reassures the audience that no, she is her true self. Okay,
well, that seemed pretty comprehensive to me.
Pretty comprehensive? All right. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a lot to go over.
It's a very hard thing to convey, especially the way the film ends, that sort of long sequence flitting between reality and dream, I think.
Yeah, as I was trying to cover it, I was like, do I just describe this shot by shot? Is that maybe the only option? I don't know. Did I miss anything in the recap? Did anything seem important that I missed? No?
Nothing I can think of. No, it was pretty comprehensive, especially all down to the fish as well.
I am the best!
I didn't get that it was Rumi's room at the end because it's such a replica of Mima's room.
Yeah.
I actually didn't get that, so I'm glad you picked up on that. I thought maybe just a couple of fish had revived themselves, which now seems not to be true.
See, I think what they're doing with the fish, I think the thing is, now, I actually thought you were going to call me out on this, but the thing is, actually, she looks out the window and
the view's different.
The view's different. Right. She's in a totally different place, you know. So really, it's looking out the window that triggers it. But I think that they're trying to use the fish throughout the film as kind of almost an Inception memento kind of thing,
something that can indicate whether you're in where you are and sort of
is this reality or is this a dream space. The fish are kind of being used for the same thing as that, because you can see at different times throughout the film you get the glimpses of the fish.
Also the idea of a fish tank and being in one and always being viewed is quite interesting. The fish being a little signifier for Mima herself.
Totally. And it's interesting, how they use the fish or even the icons on the Mima's Room website. Yeah. So there's always
the background of the website.
No. There's to the side
they're bullet points, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They're used as bullet points. Yeah, those little fish.
Remember website design? I remember fucking up my parents' computer trying to get glowing cursors and stuff like that
on your MySpace page.
Yeah.
Or on your sort of own personal website. I remember doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So,
flickering cursor.
Yeah, you guys can talk about, remember website design, and the first thing you come up with is MySpace.
All right, Grandpa.
Yeah,
Jesus.
I'm an 88 birthday. I really remember those kinds of websites, you know.
But now it's all done for us on our avatar platforms. So
But I don't know.
Squarespace, get at us.
A part of the movie that I really liked and actually did feel the need to explain to you guys last night was how when Mima's I'm not patronizing, just literally I'm older, you know. When Mima's Room, the website, is first introduced into the story, her manager is having to say to her, you know, this is a URL, and it's because Google didn't exist, you know, or it wasn't
HTTP.
You know, Google wasn't being widely used especially not in Japan at the time. So you needed to know the exact name of a website and to be able to type that into your web browser, or you could not find it. You know, I mean that was
there was no sort of Google Smart Search, I guess.
There were no widely used search engines at that time, and you know, even if there were, they didn't have a huge index of available websites. So just little things like that. I think it still feels like a very modern film. It still feels very relevant.
Yes,
but little things I think kind of age it in a way that is hard to really understand. You know, because it's not really recorded history. It's sort of more like folk online history. But anyway, so I got a couple of softball questions that I want to just chuck in. First, get us talking a little bit about it before we get into some of the deeper issues, because obviously this is a really deep, psychologically interesting movie. For very first question I have is just, you know, this is Spookbox. This is the horror movie podcast. Is this a horror film? Is this a psychological thriller? Does it matter? Does it make a difference? How do we define it?
My gut says it doesn't matter, but I think this is where I think someone like David Lynch is quite important, because he doesn't necessarily make horror films or films that he thinks of as horror films.
Right.
But there is something, he detects something inherently horrifying in the idea that you can never know exactly who you are, I think. Right.
That the instability of the self.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's whether like matters of existentialism scare you or not.
Yeah.
It like leads to whether you would see this as a horror or not, I think. So if you're someone that's concerned about identity and, you know, how stable that is, then this would be a psychological horror. If you're more interested in the violent aspects, it's probably just a thriller.
See, I actually had a differing opinion on that exact same rationality. I thought this is definitely a horror because the eyeballs, they keep stabbing
in the eyeballs.
There's so much eyeball stabbing in this movie.
There's quite a lot of gore in this, actually. There's a lot of blood. Gory. There's a lot of glass in skin and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I started to get there with the horror thing, like, and I think I had forgotten. I had forgotten just how strange Me Mania looked. You know, he actually really reminded me of... So I'm a big fan of Ari Aster's films, and I know that I think the verdict is still not in on Ari Aster. Like,
only 2 films, I suppose.
Only 2 films. Yeah. And they were both really good, but I think people are like still, you know, is this a very lucky filmmaker that made 2, you know, kind of funny, kind of scary comedy takes, or, you know, is this guy the real deal? I think Ari Aster's super clever, but one thing that does trouble me in his films is that he seems to have a kind of predilection for physical abnormalities. You know, he likes choosing actors that look very distinctive.
Why does that trouble you?
It's just kind of an interesting thing that he keeps putting into his movies as like, this is horror, so things are gonna look horrible.
Yeah, it's to cue you to be scared, I guess.
Right, yeah. And so Me Mania's like physical deformity, I found kind of like telling in that way, that like he's, you know, we're being prompted to believe that he's like the monster. Yeah. So I thought like this is a horror movie. You know, there is a kind of Jason Voorhees type character in this, even though that is misdirection. You know, I think it's playing on a lot of the like horror tropes. I don't think it's just a thriller.
Is Black Swan a remake of Perfect Blue? I forgot to read up on that. People talk about it a lot when they talk about Perfect Blue.
That's true. I've not seen Black Swan.
It's
but something that I've read.
I'm not that keen on it, so I can't be bothered talking about it, but I just wondered if anyone knew. Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of like similarities there. There's a lot of similar themes gone over. There's, doubling is a really important thing. In Black Swan, you have that like exchange of identities. But I think the kind of questions being asked about female sexuality are subtly different between the two films. But there's a definite, focus on that as a key theme. Building on from that slightly, I think one of the interesting things about the film is that it is a horror film or a thriller film. It's an adult film at any stretch of the imagination, but released in 1997 or 1998. Some of the early reviews of the film that came back were saying it's as if Walt Disney and Alfred Hitchcock created a movie together. And while that maybe seems kind of apt,
the Walt Disney I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
But Hitchcock certainly.
In 1997, I think, Western film reviewers didn't know what other animator to draw upon. They weren't going to start drawing on like Soviet animation or something. They didn't really know what else to do other than say, animation. Who's an animator? Disney.
Disney is.
Disney and Hitchcock. I
suppose Ghibli hadn't taken off in the West to the extent that it had after Spirited Away, perhaps.
No, and 97, that's pretty much smack bang in the midst of the Disney Renaissance. So
I actually also was reminded of like are they called the Ugly Sisters in Cinderella? What are they called again?
The evil stepsisters.
The evil stepsisters. I was reminded of them in the illustration style of the idols, like Mima and stuff. Like they had the same kind of like little turned up nose and like sort of like cheeky mouth.
Interesting.
So there's something quite unique about the style of drawing in Perfect Blue, and it did remind me of like in Western animation more like kind of troubling characters, the way that the women are drawn, even though they're the most beautiful people in the film.
Villainous almost, you think?
Yeah, like there was just something like mischievous about their faces. Okay. Like, I don't know.
Maybe duplicitous.
Yeah, it signaled that to me.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. I mean, okay, so they have an interesting look about them, but do you think that that's something that could have been achieved through just like good casting, or is it essential for this film to have been an animated film? Do you think this could have been achieved without animation?
I think about this all the time.
Amazing.
I think this sort of film really befits an animation because, to my mind, the only person who not necessarily because of the characters, but because of the way it's edited, I think. The way it's sort of put together, the way I say at the very end when reality and dreams sort of start bleeding into each other when, is it Rumi or Rami?
Rumi.
Rumi pursues Mima through the street and sort of from her apartment. It makes me think of the way that David Fincher uses CGI. There's the ways that he's able to sort of pull cameras to places where they wouldn't normally be able to go.
Yeah.
Perhaps that hadn't taken off in any meaningful way in mainstream cinema, in live action mainstream cinema, but I think animation is a perfect way of bleeding reality into dreams because it means that you can make cuts that you wouldn't normally see in live action films. You can pull a camera through a TV screen.
Yeah.
You can like the way that Mima and Rumi sort of blend into one another at that chase sequence. You couldn't do that without CGI, and I'm not sure what CGI would be at a sort of competent enough stage at that point. Maybe it'd be too expensive. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether to film geek out on you right now, just when you're saying about like, that kind of playful cinematography stuff, I mean, things like that have been around since the 50s. Actually, Hitchcock, a really good example in that with Rear Window. There's a lot of camera trickery in that film, allowing zooms to seem to go through windows and stuff. Also that old German movie has some trick zooms in it as well. But I think the point of that final sequence where you're able to see what Rumi actually looks like. That she's this like profusely sweating, realistic weight for her age, middle-aged woman in a ridiculous cosplay cocktail dress.
Whereas in the entire film, she's sort of played out as being sort of quite plain, quite sort of smartly dressed.
Yes.
Almost.
She's a very professional-looking lady, but that in Mima's mind, because she's so troubled and so stressed at this point, that I think what we're being led to believe is that in Mima's mind, she feels like she's being pursued by her alter ego, who is able to float almost miraculously through these streets, but then every so often we catch a quick glimpse in a mirrored surface of this like sweating like fleshy human being
in an ill-fitting outfit sort of thing.
Yeah. And I just think it's so cool and it's so interesting as well that like Rumi would have purchased a dress for Mima and then squeezed herself into it, and instead of like, I think it was just kind of an interesting like tell about the state of the character. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe it says something really bad about like seeing a normal sized middle-aged woman chasing you through the streets. Something scary, maybe showing that people sweating is scary.
Do you mind me saying what I find so scary about it?
Yeah, go.
I'd forgotten that Rumi was the main villain here with the personality disorder after having seen the film once. And then when I remembered she was an ex-idol when we started watching this again, I was really comforted, like, oh, what a great asset that character is to Mima. Like, she has someone who's been through what she's been through and has turned out okay. And then something that's so unsettling is that nobody really makes it out unscathed from idol culture. Like, no one's allowed to grow old. No one's allowed to adjust. They're kind of trapped by it and scarred by it forever. There's no future, basically. It's really unsettling that Rumi was apparently a well-adjusted woman who had moved on from that career, but actually was deeply shattered as a person and split into different people from it. So I think it's the fact that we didn't see it coming, but then it's quite clear that your future disappears when you sign up for it. The ability to kind of age as a well-adjusted person is taken away.
Now, do we think this is something unique to Japanese pop idol culture? I was talking about this the other day with you, Dav, that there are these... it was really cool that the term graduate was used early in the film. There are these sort of after-school groups that are kind of like... They're kind of comparable to like a drama school, like a kid's drama school, except they separate themselves out into classes. And as you are recognized as particularly interesting or particularly promising, you move up through ranks and are put in little like groups with other girls that show similar promise. And then there are boys groups as well, and they work as their own institutions. And so whereas some girls would leave school and go on to university, other girls may be leaving school and going off to be part of a girl group for a part of time. So that's how it works in Japan and more recently South Korea. They have a similar a similar program working within South Korea, and it's all worked in tandem with record labels and stuff. So we can sort of try to understand a bit about Mima's life, maybe why she doesn't understand how to use a computer, because she's maybe hasn't had, the same amount of education, because she's been spending so much time as like a sort of a working her way up from a child star to a pop idol. Is this something unique to Japan, or do we think that someone like, I don't know, is Mel B always going to be the Spice Girls Mel B? Is being a pop star something that you can ever leave behind?
I think you brought up something interesting, because the first person I thought of watching this film was actually Miley Cyrus.
Oh, yeah.
Who, I think if we do have anything in the West that's similar to sort of these academies, almost these pop academies.
Disney Club?
Disney Club, or whoever goes on to be in original programming on Disney Channel. So Demi Lovato found a difficult time graduating, quote unquote, from those sort of TV shows and sort of very family-friendly, sugar-coated kind of pop music.
Yeah, she was then plagued by like addiction issues, personality issues, like dieting issues, because she had trouble assimilating like her past self with this graduated self, that the woman that she's trying to become, really. Can I read a quotation by John Berger's Ways of Seeing?
Is this about Mel B?
It would definitely shine some light on Mel B and any other celebrity you might wish to enter into that.
I'm feeling out-theoried.
I think it's really important.
Do I need to be here anymore? Oh God, if I'm not bringing...
Out-theoried by episode 4.
I think it's so important, I'm going to have to say it.
All right, okay, here we go.
And as the only woman or female identifying person in this group, I'm going to pull that card.
We just got shut down.
So we all know John Berger's critical essays from 1972 on Western cultural aesthetics and their hidden ideologies.
Like the back of my hand, like my hometown.
I know you've read them so much, guys, I know. But the quotation that I think is important is, "A woman must continually watch herself. She is almost continually accompanied by her own image of herself. While she is walking across a room, or while she is weeping at the death of her father, she can scarcely avoid envisaging herself walking or weeping. From earliest childhood, she has been taught and persuaded to survey herself continually, and so she comes to consider the surveyor and the surveyed within her as the two constituent yet always distinct elements of her identity as a woman. She has to survey everything she is and everything she does, because how she appears to men is of crucial importance for what is normally thought of as her success in life. Her own sense of being in herself is supplanted by a sense of being appreciated as herself by another. One might simplify this by saying men act and women appear, men look at women, women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves. The surveyor of a woman is herself, in herself is male, the surveyed female. Thus she turns herself into an object, and most particularly an object of vision, a sight." So that was John Berger in 1972 talking about, Western visual aesthetics in media and the way that they can be internalized. So I think that, like, in the West and our celebrity culture, we're definitely primed for this kind of duality and the fracturing of self that creates. It's inherent in us in the way that we relate to media.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of that Ways of Seeing is 57?
72.
72, Jesus,
yeah.
Sorry, yeah, of course, geez, oh my God. A great sort of accompanying piece to that is, they're usually given together on like film studies courses and stuff is Mulvey's work on male gaze.
And he's back.
No, but I just think the reason I'm bringing it up is just as kind of like in case anybody's listening to it and thinking like, oh, that's some outdated terminology or anything like that. I think it's still really, really important to embrace work like Berger's work, but to try to work to extend it and understand that when we're talking about male or female, it's possible and I think necessary to understand those terms as dislocated from any kind of genetic biological sexuality, and instead try to understand those terms as socially constructed norms and performances that are embodied. Still, some of the ways that he's writing sort of suggests that there's like an agency or intentionality behind the adoption of the female performance. Like, today I'm going to choose to have this almost kind of fractured identity, but anyway, no, a really, really, really good quotation, and so accurate for this movie.
Well, if I can say how it's relevant, I think that the socially produced female is something that is split in and of itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That, not speaking about genetics or sex, but the socially produced female
yes.
contains within that both a surveyor and a surveyed, and it's a constant balance between those two things. Anyone
Absolutely.
identifying as female can relate to that, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah, totally.
So I think it's still relevant today, but it definitely could do with some amendments, but particularly relevant to this film.
Absolutely. So that that idea of the surveyed and the surveillance, you know, we get that so clearly in Perfect Blue with the split between Rumi and Mima, because they both believe that they're the same object, you know. So it's this like the surveyor of Rumi, it's not just that Mima is being surveyed by the surveyor. Instead, they both are performing variously as the same person. That's what's so interesting about how when Mima is looking at Mima's Room, the website, she's not entirely clear if she's reading about some fictional version of herself or if she is now reading about a truer version of herself than she actually has the ability to access.
Yeah, like a sort of, a truer version, because I mean, the details on that site go down to the way she stepped off a train. Yeah. Something that we never think about in our daily life.
Like such a minute level. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's that, there's an exchange of, embodiment, you know, of who is playing what role. I think you've really paved the way to what I was kind of hoping would be the main point of discussion. What is this film saying about female sexuality?
Well, I think that the reason why that duality of like surveyor and surveyed is important to this film is because in some of the scenes that we talked about earlier, where Mima is in a photography shoot and also the TV show rape scene, we see her through the eyes of others and also through cameras. Yeah. It's not really her perspective. It's kind of her perspective as accessed through being surveyed as a woman. So it's that kind of fracturing. Like we zoom back and see her through the camera lens, that kind of thing. So I think that's why she's so traumatized, even when she comes back to her bedroom, where she no longer is being surveyed because the surveyor is within herself. Yeah. So I think it's quite troubling for her sexual identity because it's always relational to the way she's being sexualized by men.
What's interesting is she's always being sexualized by men, but we are given no indication that she actually has any kind of sexual or romantic relationship, or really relationships of any kind with any human in the film.
And her room is kind of like sort of like a childhood haven. Yeah, with all of her plushies and the video games, and a lot of adults take refuge in these things, but I feel like that's more of an internet age phenomenon. Like at that time, it's a very like childlike bedroom for someone to have. Yes. And so I think there's something about trying to control how people sexualize you by like reverting to this like childlike appearance. Like there's a drag star in Glasgow, and I cannot pronounce their name because it's Irish. Oh, okay. I think you might know their name, Daf. Is it Sigari Wood? But a lot of their drag is of like a sort of Victorian doll like appearance, and they've spoken about how the very like baby doll aesthetic is a way of controlling their sexualization by others. So there's something about like even in the privacy of her own room, Mima's trying to control how she sees herself, even by infantilizing herself.
Does this doll thing have anything to do with the Lolita phenomenon?
I think it borrows like elements from that. The drag artist that I like. Yeah,
it's referred to as gothic Lolita, I think, in cosplay culture.
But it's a way of like going back in time to kind of like control your sexualization. Like, so I don't know.
EGL, elegant gothic Lolita. Yes. Fantastic.
That's a funny one.
It's like a resistance in a way, and I think it's very interesting.
Before
because
we
I don't
get
think
away
people
from this,
see that in it. They think that people are just in it for the aesthetic, but I think there's a lot more to the aesthetic.
how do you think this manifests itself in the strip/rape scene from Double Bind, when she's actually dressed as like a Lolita maid type character?
That's right, yeah.
And when the scene begins, Mima is clutching at her chest in a kind of terrified posture. And then as soon as they say action, she starts performing these, I guess, cliched stripper moves. And then the observers from the camera booth say, don't ex-pop idols make for a great scene? Mm-hmm. You know, they don't even say she's beautiful, she's sexy, anything like that. What they say is that her presence is able to make the scene better.
Yeah, I think it's
sorry, go on.
no worries. I think it's like an inherently provocative version of like a kind of like baby doll aesthetic, because the dress is like very cut away. She doesn't have a bra on, and I think that it's like, you know, a warped version of the way that she's trying to control herself in a childlike way. That's all executed by the producers. It's like a sort of deflowering fantasy. It's a male fantasy,
There's
you know?
also the implication that really this is just a manifestation of what has always been the case for her, even with Cham. Because you mentioned earlier, we were talking about this earlier, Connor, about the fact that a lot of the fans of Cham were actually sort of grown men, as opposed to sort of maybe the younger sort of target audience.
Yeah.
This idea that she's always been sexualized, she's always been objectified in this way. And really what makes for a great scene is this idea of that innocence being overtly stripped away.
And then that initial scene where she's performing with Cham still, the kind of heyday, which she doesn't want to leave, it's actually quite like a sad audience and like a small collection of people, and they're all male. So even the career that she wants to return to is within that trapping. Like, you know, that's the best that she could get. And when she moves beyond that, she's only further sexualized, further exposed, further fractured.
Yeah.
So,
which just makes me think that, you know, this reading of her trying to sort of retain a kind of childhood innocence with her room or something.
Maybe
or trying
never
to say,
existed.
It maybe never existed. She's
Yeah.
someone who's torn between two different kinds of objectification.
Yeah.
That relate to each other in more ways than they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like possible identities, but none of them are the real her, which is maybe why it's interesting that in the final scene she has different hair, she's driving, which is like a very autonomous action. You know, she's literally in the driver's seat of her own life. So maybe we never see, other than a glimpse at the end, what the real Mima is like. Well, and we're not meant to see. That's the point. She drives off, the film ends. We don't get to see that, and I think that's quite cool.
So we don't have a huge amount of time left. I mean, that is so fascinating. I mean, okay, if ever anybody needs an essay topic to write about, then, you know, the division of surveillance and being surveilled, and the permeability of those two things, and who were you referencing again?
John Berger.
You know, that with application to Perfect Blue is such an interesting area. But I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask that lead on from what you guys were talking about. And the big one for me is a real self a thing? You know, is there such a thing as a true persistent... No.
Moves closer to microphone. Can I just say Daf moved closer, lips on microphone?
No more questions.
No.
Well, no, I mean, it's something that I think comes up a lot of the time with, you know, people being on social media and having like an Instagram presence or a fake Instagram, you know, this whole idea of internet fakeness, you know, is there such a thing as a persistent, enduring self, or are we in flux?
I think the idea, the thing about using, the thing that makes this film quite prescient or prophetic in a way is that it does seem to foresee this idea that the identity has always been malleable, but the internet at least provided an opportunity for people to create avatars, right? You could say that this film is a way of showing what happens when those avatars become out of control, or they slip out of the sort of the creator's grasp or something like that.
What I'd like to posit is that there's no singular real self, but there are multiple selves. And to try and flatten multiple selves into one identity is life-threatening. Because if we think about the parallel to this film in Western culture and media, which was that Bjork had a life-threatening incident with a stalker in the 90s, a couple of years before this film was released. And he was called Ricardo Lopez, and he would upload video diaries. And he was angered by how Bjork's private relationships failed to match up to
With Goldie,
his
is that
perception
right?
of what she was like from her avatar. And then this culminated when, in 1996, he mailed her a package bomb filled with sulfuric acid so that they could be together in the afterlife. It was intercepted by the police, but he still continued to kill himself and follow through on his plan. So Bjork was really distressed by this, and afterwards she said, "I make music, but in other terms, people shouldn't take me too literally and get involved in my personal life." So she refers to something as her personal life, and I think that is one aspect of her life and it exists. But to say that that is her real life and her avatar is her unreal life isn't true, because the two met one another when someone's belief about her avatar threatened her real personal life. So they're adjacent, but they also cross over. And I think to say that there's this delineation between your real life, your avatar life, just isn't true when it can be life-threatening.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's I feel like this movie is maybe more relevant now than it was I think maybe in 1997 there was a certain element of fantasy about it. I mean, clearly there wasn't, because this had just happened to Bjork, and it
Actually, the similarities are eerily...
It's really
there's
eerily
quite a lot
similar.
of them. Yeah.
And then if you look at Bjork's relationship to people pestering her private life following this happening to her, it's clearly left an impact, because she went on to attack a photographer, and she cited exhaustion and, was kind of apologetic about her outburst.
And
but then she did it again and ripped a photographer's shirt. And I never knew about the stalker incident with Ricardo Lopez, and I always thought that Bjork was like such a Viking, like such a character. But when you see it in the context of her being stalked and nearly murdered, then it adds a whole new depth to the fact that someone looming in her peripheral vision causes her to flip out.
yeah.
So there's a similarity with the film there, and I think that a lot of people don't know about this piece of like celebrity lore, but in the 90s, I think that was a time when a stalker was a horrific psychological threat.
Oh yeah.
But then I wanted to talk about the Megan Fox yellow rose meme, if anyone's aware of it.
What's this one? No, I've not seen it.
Do you remember the photo from like 2008 when a guy tries to hand Megan Fox a yellow rose?
Oh, vaguely.
At the Transformers premiere in London.
Yeah,
No,
I
not at all.
vaguely remember this, yeah.
Well, it was memed a lot, and in the following years was memed a lot, but basically people really like identified with this like young wannabe wooer of Megan Fox, because she seems to be completely passing him by in the photo. And a reward was offered to track him down of £5,000 by Kodak. And then following that, Megan Fox had to issue an apology and said, "I feel so sad for him. That's so terrible. That kills me. I'm sorry, sweet boy. I would gladly accept your rose if ever I see you again. Paparazzi would not let me to you. I'm so embarrassed." Then he got flown to New York to be on a TV segment with Megan Fox, but it got bumped from the show because Michael Jackson died. So basically, at that point, roughly 10 years later from the Bjork incident with a stalker, I'm not calling this young man a stalker, but what I'm saying is that in culture, we kind of sympathized with the stalker figure.
At least they're sort of an inevitability.
Or the wannabe romantic interest of a celebrity. We money was offered to track him down. And Megan Fox publicly apologized. Okay, there was probably an element of like humor to that on her part, but you know, she was someone who owed something to him, it seemed.
Jeez.
So that happened about 10 years ago. And then when I was researching this film, I saw that Kim Kardashian did a Perfect Blue themed photo shoot 2 years ago. That was our buzzer. Is that our stalker?
I'll get it.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, so Megan Fox did the rose thing. Moving on from that, that buzzer's thrown me off. Kim Kardashian did a Perfect Blue inspired photo shoot. And obviously Kim Kardashian is someone who is famous because of her sex tape, which I have to make clear, I don't want her to sue me. I couldn't afford it. It's only an alleged release on her part. So someone alleges that it was fabricated on her part. Her mum was her manager and they planned to release it to make her famous. But that is still to this day denied by Kim Kardashian. But I think that adds some flavour to this because it's commonly understood that she calculated her own rise to celebrity. But in any case, I think that the photo shoot is interesting because it's a visual reference to Perfect Blue, but I'm not sure whether there's anything more to say about avatars and stalkers.
Okay.
From the meeting of these two things, of Kim Kardashian and Perfect Blue.
So last week, when we were discussing Butt Boy,
well, if I can just say one more thing.
The one and only.
No, you can't.
I think that
No, you can't, because you just talked for 15 minutes, and I have no idea where it's going.
Well, if you let me summarize, the 90s, Bjork, stalkers were scary, Perfect Blue. The late noughties, stalkers were actually really crucial to your identity as a celebrity, and you kind of owed something to them and you had to kind of play with their interaction with you.
It's often said that most celebrities know their stalkers.
Most celebrities know their stalkers. You had to at least have a relationship with them. If Michael Jackson hadn't have died, who knows what would have happened of this whole Megan Fox young yellow rose guy. Maybe she would have like went to prom with him or something. Take it to 2018 and Kim Kardashian, media mogul of this era, is doing a Perfect Blue themed photo shoot with, you know, a reference to this film overtly. What does that say? Does that say
that's
that,
what I'm asking you. What does that say?
Well, I think it shows that as a celebrity, she's fully embracing the parallels to the film and welcoming the stalker figure, because stalker equals more media coverage, equals more money. I think that stalkers are now part of the celebrity themselves. They've been subsumed into one being in this money-making time.
To me, that seems like...
You're such a loose cannon. It's great. It's...
Well, very good. To me, that
Even if it kills you, you need to be at one with your stalker.
To me, that just seems like another facet of kind of primarily American fascination with serial killers and sort of cults. That seems like a similar thing.
But Kim Kardashian posing as the protagonist of Perfect Blue,
it's pretty meta.
It's kind of, it's pretty meta. Maybe there's nothing more to it than postmodernism or like postmodernism, but I feel like particularly, I couldn't really go in depth into Kim Kardashian on the podcast, but I feel like...
That's a different podcast. Tune in next week.
It's a different podcast, but I feel like that is an acceptance of the duality of being in the public eye and an acceptance of stalkers.
Wait a minute. So you're trying to say, Heather, that in 1997... a stalker was someone that was going to come and murder you, and that's what you were afraid of with the stalker. And now the stalker has been co-opted by the pop industrial complex.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a way to like make more money.
So, okay, so if John Lennon...
Can I just say, I left for 5 minutes.
You need to like embrace the stalker, basically. You've got no other choice.
You have no other choice. Okay, so pops. Okay, but has that made the threat any less dangerous? Has it made? I mean, you know, the stalker is still a scary thing to have, right? It's still right.
Well, I mean, there's a vague sense that it's been fetishized in some way. The idea that you know, to be a celebrity is just to be stalked.
I think that, you know, if I had a stalker, I would be scared. Like, I don't have security and that kind of thing. I don't have like £100 million. Kim Kardashian also was stalked. Like, somebody broke into her Paris hotel room, but I feel like it was hard for me to feel sympathy for her because, you know, it doesn't seem as life-threatening.
You know what this
when
sounds like
someone's
to me?
that powerful.
This sounds like back in my day.
In my day, stalkers were scary. I don't know.
These young celebrities nowadays.
So they don't know. They don't know they're alive. They don't know they're being.
I feel like Bjork had a very human reaction. She was like, you know, aggressively trying to defend herself.
Sure.
But then now, like, I feel like the stalker is like embraced almost because it could hurt your image to not pander to your stalker.
Okay. So I'm just trying to work this back into the sort of the themes of the film. You know, where the stalker is someone who poses this life-threatening you know, position in somebody's life. Okay, so there's this terrifying thing, and so we have this film, this time capsule from the 1990s, and if we try to appreciate it now, what we can say is that there's a more complicated relationship with stalking today for a variety of different reasons. No, I mean, I absolutely accept that. I think that there's a really interesting question underlying that then, which is just, you know, is this movie more relevant now than it was, and for what reason? Is it because through Twitter we have been able to sort of see into, so, you know, in the movie we have Mima's room. You know, are we able to see Kim's every thought? You know, have we gone beyond fetishizing the celebrity's room, and now we are, you know, entering into every single second of their day?
Well, no, because that's still a curated self, though, right? It's still this. We're still no closer to finding out what celebrities are really like. What we do get is an idea of what we do get is something like a sort of a pretend real life celebrity,
right?
So I think. Is this film more relevant today than it ever was?
To refer to the film, when Mima is buying milk and that is contrasted as a private activity, her normal life, which is infringed upon when it's reported on, a celebrity now would take a selfie buying the milk.
Yes, that's
your point. What it is that I think that actually we don't fetishize private time as much as we used to. The reason that Bjork was so upset was that her private time getting off a plane was infringed upon, and I think that was what we used to fetishize, the private sphere, the personal life, and now that is no longer fetishized in the same way. That is something that you can monetize. Right. So why would you want to keep it sacred?
You know, it's a real shame that none of us know more about the Japanese pop idol scene. You know, we know a little bit about the South Korean one with BTS and you know, bands like Blackpink, things like that. You know, Heather, thinking about this this co-opting of the stalker into the celebrity identity thing, which is really, really interesting.
I think you're leaving money on the table if you don't. Like, if you don't become your own self-stalker, if you're that high profile and you don't publicize your previously private life, then you're losing money.
It could be a way of actually protecting yourselves against stalkers as well.
By becoming your own stalker.
Maybe there's a way of...
Almost by inventing one.
Or maybe there's a sort of fear that, you know, if someone's already stalked, there's not enough room for another stalker. I don't know. I don't know how the mentality works.
You play that role for them.
But I want to ask you, do you think that being a pop idol now then is, you know, is it a worse deal than it was in 1998? You know, you're saying that the thing that we have lost is the fetishization of privacy. So have we lost privacy?
Well, I don't know. Like, if we look at someone like Megan Fox, who no longer is working, moves lips close to microphone. Yes, I think we have. But then, you know, some people just choose to leave the sector, whatever, of like celebrity altogether because they're not able to control that So like Megan Fox is someone that doesn't really work anymore, so she can have her personal private life, and it feels like a more archaic way to see yourself, to be like, I want to preserve that.
I think I just realised what film we might watch in the future.
What?
Stay tuned. I'm not going to say it right now.
And if I was to say, am I a Megan Fox or am I a Kim Kardashian? I think I'm a Megan Fox.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm a Megan Fox.
Thank you.
You know,
we
like where do I fall in that scale of privacy?
We have like no time left right now, but
I think that's where Mima falls. She drives away. She goes, see you suckers, you know, I'm not going to perform for you anymore.
Yeah, except that she is still an actress at the end of the movie.
It's implied. Yeah, it's implied that
but
she
one
has
with more like private time.
Yeah. I mean,
she's wearing shades at the end as well.
She's wearing shades.
If I'm totally honest, I think
she's no longer being driven by people. She is driving.
Yeah, I mean, you made that observation earlier, but I think I'm 100% won over by this idea that essentially the society that this movie is depicting is one that we just cannot compare to now.
Well, I think we can. I think it's the difference between being managed and being your own manager.
Okay, so but the trouble is that almost the way that you're looking at this is saying that the perfect blue situation is something that we almost want to try to get back to, and that doesn't seem right.
No, because I think one of the things that sort of, I can't remember. I keep forgetting her name. Mima. Yeah. I keep thinking it's Mammy, but you swap the vowels. Is that she's naive. I mean, the thing is about her being stalked is that it was always happening.
Yes.
But she was just ignorant of the fact at the beginning.
Yes.
So, I mean, to go back to a time when we felt we had privacy is sort of impossible, really.
Would you agree with that or not agree with that? Because I thought that's what you were trying to say, that there was just no way to get back to perfect blue, that whatever the stalker situation is now, it's almost become a postmodern form of stalking. It's stalking, but it's no longer a threat. It's stalking is now just part of the business. Which is, to me, is far more terrifying than what's depicted in Perfect Blue.
I think it's part of the business. I think that you still have a life-threatening risk, but maybe less so, because the contrast between your avatar and your real self is something that's less extreme, because you're exposing more of your real self, quotation marks, even if that's a curated one. So you can control that as well to a degree. So the thing that stalkers seem to get so upset about is that contrast. But if, as part of your avatar, there's also a curated real self, then that acts as a kind of scapegoat for your actual real self.
Yeah,
so you can curate it to be something that they won't get pissed about.
So this is turning my head into the inside of a kaleidoscope, and I hope that anybody else listening to this feels the same way. Incredibly interesting, but really pretty scary stuff, I'm going to come out and say. But the main thing that it's drawing me towards then is my final question, which is good because we're already over time. But in this movie, they hint at mental health, and it ends in a mental institution where Rumi has been hospitalized and seems to be in this fugue state. She seems to believe that she is the one true Mima. But I guess my question is this movie really saying anything about mental health, about multiple personality disorders, or is it just using those multiple personality disorders as a narrative device? The same thing that was done in Hamlet, the same thing that is, a big part of our culture. Is it really saying anything about mental health? Does it have anything important to say? Anything you can take away from it?
I think it's just a narrative device.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I don't feel like it has any meaningful commentary on the experience or like the lived experience of having that kind of affliction.
Can I move into the mic and say, my mental health is also just a narrative device? That's all mine is too. Nothing more to it.
But I wonder at the time of this movie was made, I wonder if films even really explored that sort of thing in any meaningful degree. Do you think?
So. Yeah. Multiple personality disorders, schizophrenia.
But in any sort of meaningful way that explores.
Girl Interrupted.
Yeah, I suppose there was, but that would have been a little bit later.
I can't pretend to know. Anyway,
or something.
Wrapping it up.
Wrapping it up a little bit. I don't know. I think there is something interesting there, but I think when we're reflecting on mental health and the kind of the loss of the personal, I just that's I'm really troubled by all of that.
That's what I call Spookbox.
I'm spooked. I feel really sorry for celebrities now. I feel less sorry for Mima. At least she gets out at the end of the film to an extent.
It's okay because you can like peel away layers of this like real you that you can control now, so that people don't get as upset when you're like photo shoot you and the story that's leaked don't match up, because you've already leaked something to them yourself.
It almost puts them off.
You control the leak.
I guess, right?
You put them off the scent. So, but you know, I'm pretty sure actually someone was trying to rob Kim Kardashian. I don't think they were trying to like kill her or molest her.
But here's my question though: is that so at the end of the movie, Mima is able to look into the rearview mirror and say,
"This is my real life," or something like that.
I am real.
Yes.
It is the real me, because the nurses are saying, was that her? Was that a lookalike? No. I am the real Mima. From your description of the the mental state of modern celebrity, I wonder with what level of certainty they are able to know where this ends. If there's the narrativization of the private self and the public self.
I think it's like there's just another layer added. So John Berger talked about the surveyor and the surveyed, and I think then you've got to have like an extra layer there now, which is like the surveyed surveyor or something. It's like a combination of the two, and it's something that you like curate, survey, edit, and reveal to people, and it has more elements of like real you in it, but I don't know.
That sounds exhausting.
It's still a performance.
It's still performance. It's just like another lens is added on to the way you view yourself. You had one before, and now you've got like an extra one.
Well, so I know we don't have much time here, but like, how do you feel? How do we feel watching the end of that film, thinking about this idea of the private self being virtually non-existent?
I feel okay, because I feel like when she puts on her glasses and drives away, it's like there is an element of her private self.
Well, screw you, because you just ruined the movie for me with this whole chat today. Now I'm thinking she's looking in the mirror saying, no, I am the real Mima. I'm like, well, for how long? Because Twitter's going to be invented in 20 years, and now you're going to be screwed.
So that's why maybe it's like such a nostalgic piece, because it's like for that drive and for the next couple of years, maybe she's the real Mima, but then like social media era begins, and it's like
this isn't a horror film. This is the best case scenario.
I mean, all I want is to travel back to 1999, get some Oakleys on, and drive a car the fuck away from everyone.
Some puddle of mud.
Isn't that what we all want?
Oh my god. Okay.
That's the best case scenario.
So the main question I had today was, is this a horror film? It's a question I think I'm always going to be asking with the films that I pick. I think I'm now completely
unsettled,
beaten into submission that this is actually not a horror film at all. I don't know. Daf, what do you think? Have you changed your opinion about the movie?
Have I changed my opinion of the movie? No, I still believe it's a horror film. I still believe it's a. I think. So my reading of the ending was the film was that yes, she has a kind of agency. She's in the car. She says I'm the real thing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But my reading of the movie was still. I think the movie kept me on edge the whole time. I felt like, oh no, what if things turn again? What if we pan out and she's also on a screen?
Yeah. I mean, you're watching a movie, and I
didn't even get to talk about this.
Right.
I'm kind of annoyed, but that's a whole other thing. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
And the harbinger of death, the movie destroyer, Heather.
What was the question?
Have you changed the way that you think about this movie?
Who killed the crack?
After the hour of conversation, or was this always the way you were seeing it from the beginning?
No, I think that like. Basically, like, we saw Mima's room, as in her, like, physical room, as her private space, but it was never really her private space. And, like, private space is when you're just totally alone. And we were there with her, the viewer, when she was in her room. So, like, I think that private space does still exist, but if you're speaking about someone else's private space, you don't know about it. Like,
Okay, yeah. You've blown my goddamn mind.
So I really like the film. I like how it ends. I feel hopeful about it because it's like,
What?
well, she goes somewhere else. Like,
Amazing. Okay, I like your positivity. I like trying to end this on a positive note.
Yeah.
You've scared the absolute crap out of me, but hey, I guess that's just me. All
she
right.
goes wherever Megan Fox has gone, and I'm loving that for them.
On that note, I hope that the delivery we just got wasn't a yellow rose or anything.
Or
Yeah.
like a sulfuric
Maybe I do.
acid bomb.
Maybe I do. hope it
Absolutely
was. I don't
terrifying.
know.
Okay, so Perfect Blue, and a life-ruining film for some, and weirdly hopeful for others. As usual, thanks for listening. If anybody is listening and enjoying it, please do us a favor. Try to share it with friends. Try to like. Try to subscribe. Anything like that. Heather doesn't care.
I care too much.
I'd quite like a Yellow Rose sponsorship, like
No.
a florist sponsorship.
No. Jesus, I need a shower after this. I'm literally terrified. Okay, so next week, do we know what we're going to be covering? It's Heather's choice, isn't it?
Yeah, do you have any ideas?
No.
Ari Aster
It's a
films,
complete
maybe?
surprise. Maybe an Ari Aster film. Yeah.
Yes,
Does it
Midsummer.
begin with M? Yeah.
Okay, so thanks everybody for listening, and
thanks.
hopefully see you next week.
Bye.
See ya.